Hidden within the shadows of history lies a revelation so profound, so potentially catastrophic to the fabric of faith as we know it, that it dares to challenge the very foundations of one of humanity's greatest institutions. The Catholic Church, an enduring symbol of spiritual guidance and global influence, has long been portrayed as a divine creation, built upon the teachings of Jesus Christ and carried forward by the unwavering devotion of his disciples. But what if this story is only a fragment of the truth? What if the origins of the Church, shrouded in secrecy, conceal motives far more human, more calculated, and infinitely more sinister? For centuries, this institution has stood as a beacon of hope and authority, claiming to be the vessel of divine will on earth. Yet beneath the reverence, unsettling questions persist. Could the Church's creation have been orchestrated not in heavenly sanctuaries, but in the shadowy corridors of political power? Was its meteoric rise a testament to faith alone, or the result of a meticulously crafted alliance between spiritual leaders and empire builders, each wielding influence to serve their own ambitions? Imagine for a moment that the very narratives we hold sacred, stories of divine intervention, of miraculous survival against persecution, are but veils obscuring a darker, more complex reality. Could it be that the Catholic Church, rather than emerging solely from the message of Christ, was forged in the crucible of human agendas, manipulated by figures seeking control over not just faith, but entire civilizations? And if so, who were these architects of power, pulling the strings behind the veil of holiness? The history we've been taught speaks of disciples spreading Christ's teachings, of a persecuted faith that defied the odds to become the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. But history, as written by the victors, often glosses over the uncomfortable truths. What if the Church's survival and ascension were not mere coincidences of faith, but the results of deliberate political machinations? What if this sacred institution's foundation was built not just on the teachings of Christ, but on the strategic calculations of those who saw in Christianity a tool for domination? Among the most pivotal figures in this narrative is Emperor Constantine, a man whose role in shaping Christianity cannot be overstated. Before his reign, Christianity was fragmented, a scattered collection of sects and interpretations. Yet under Constantine, it became a unified force, tied inexorably to the machinery of empire. Was his embrace of Christianity an act of genuine faith, or a masterstroke of political genius designed to consolidate power and control? He saw that unifying his empire under one religion could stabilize the region and extend his authority over the vast and often tumultuous Roman territories. If you're as intrigued as we are by these hidden layers of history, don't forget to give this video a like and share it with others who might be curious about the untold stories of the Catholic Church. Together, we can keep exploring the mysteries behind what we think we know. In 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, a monumental declaration that granted religious tolerance across the empire. Yet the defining moment came in 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea, a gathering he orchestrated to bring uniformity to Christian doctrine. This council is often seen as the birthplace of what we recognize today as the Catholic Church. But here, another question arises: did Constantine's motive stem from genuine belief? Or was this merely a calculated step in his greater plan to harness the power of faith for political stability? Despite reports of his dramatic vision of the cross before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, some historical records imply that Constantine's conversion to Christianity might have been more of a strategic maneuver than a spiritual awakening. During the Council of Nicaea, Constantine and a collective of bishops established a standardized version of Christian belief, while condemning other sects as heretical. This move has fueled theories suggesting that Constantine tailored the religion to serve his imperial ambitions, prioritizing doctrines that aligned with his political aims. Here, the groundwork for an institution that would span centuries was laid, a church backed by the emperor's endorsement, one capable of extending its influence across continents. The emergence of conspiracy theories around the Catholic Church's foundation is inevitable, given the political climate of the time. Some suggest that the Church's development was part of a broader scheme to consolidate power in Rome, designed to control populations under the guise of salvation. From this perspective, the Catholic Church was not a divine institution, but rather a construct meant to channel loyalty and obedience to the Roman Empire, serving a purpose beyond its religious teachings. Was Constantine indeed the mastermind behind the Church's creation, or was he merely a pawn in a more extensive web of political and possibly darker forces? This line of thought leads us to ponder a hidden history marked by secrecy, clandestine agreements, and veiled agendas. As the Catholic Church solidified its influence over the Western world, did it come at the expense of truth and spiritual authenticity? While the Council of Nicaea formalized the doctrines that would define the Catholic Church, many contend that other, less visible forces influenced its foundation, powers potentially even beyond Emperor Constantine himself. For some proponents of alternative theories, the rise of the Catholic Church as a structured entity was no mere coincidence, but a carefully orchestrated plot involving occult forces and hidden agendas. Certain theories posit that secret societies, long before the Church's prominence, played a role in shaping its direction, pulling the strings behind the scenes to serve purposes veiled from the public eye. These theories speculate that Christianity was repurposed as a unifying force for the Roman Empire, propelled by influences not directly tied to the Church, but woven into the empire's fabric, involving secretive groups and political players working toward their ends. In fact, according to some interpretations, these groups foreshadowed the future development of powerful societies, such as the Knights Templar or even the Illuminati. They argue that esoteric knowledge and mystical traditions, including elements of Gnosticism and ancient pagan beliefs, infiltrated early Christianity and were then forcefully subdued at the Council of Nicaea, favoring doctrines that reinforced imperial rule. This hidden layer within the Church's foundation suggests that its formation was far more intricate than commonly acknowledged. Adding to the intrigue, evidence suggests that several rituals and symbols now central to Christianity have roots that predate the faith itself. For example, the cross, long associated with Christianity, was a prominent symbol in pagan ritual centuries before becoming emblematic of Christ's sacrifice. This symbolism raises a critical question: was Christianity shaped by outside forces to fulfill an overarching, possibly darker purpose? Those who support these theories believe that aspects of Christian iconography, like the cross, were adopted to harness pre-existing associations with power, transformation, and even death concepts that could be manipulated to serve an agenda far beyond simple spiritual enlightenment. The notion that the Catholic Church may have been partly crafted to suppress the original messages of Christianity raises significant questions. Early Christianity emphasized personal connection to the divine and spiritual independence, principles that posed a potential threat to centralized religious authority. Instead of fostering direct communion with God, the Church emerged as the essential intermediary, seizing control over spiritual access and, by extension, the levers of political power. A mystery persists in the disappearance of certain ancient scriptures during this period of doctrinal consolidation. Texts, like the Gospels of Thomas and Mary Magdalene, which offered alternative interpretations of Jesus' teachings, were deemed heretical and systematically destroyed. When fragments of these lost texts resurfaced centuries later, they challenged traditional church narratives and hinted at a version of Christianity that diverged sharply from established doctrine. These writings implied that Jesus' teachings may have encouraged spiritual freedom and introspection rather than rigid institutional authority. Another intriguing question centers on Peter the Apostle, whom the Catholic Church venerates as its first pope. His designation as the rock on which the Church was built is seen by some as a symbolic and strategic choice, one aimed at reinforcing the Church's authority. Why Peter, rather than Paul, whose influence on early Christianity's spread was far-reaching? Some historians propose that Peter was chosen not solely for his faith, but because his character aligned more closely with Constantine's vision for a controllable institution. By controlling the narrative and sidelining dissenting ideas, the Church solidified itself as the supreme spiritual and political authority within the Roman Empire. Christianity's rise to dominance came at a cost. Those who opposed or questioned the Church faced swift suppression. This gives rise to the possibility that early Christianity might have been perceived as a genuine threat to the prevailing social order. If this was the case, who might have benefited from steering Christianity toward a path that supported the power structures of the time? This leads us to ponder whether the Catholic Church was designed from its inception as an institution of control, weaving religious and political influence into a single, potent entity. For some, its establishment marked only the beginning of a broader plan, one that continues to unfold in the shadows even today. In the hierarchical societies of the medieval period, power was centralized under either the emperor or, later, the pope, figures regarded as divine representatives who dictated both spiritual and earthly laws. A pivotal chapter in this alliance between church and state is the donation of Constantine. According to legend, before his death, Emperor Constantine bestowed extensive lands and authority upon Pope Sylvester and the Church of Rome. This grant fortified the Church's claim to both spiritual and political power. For centuries, the donation of Constantine was invoked to justify the Church's vast temporal influence across Europe. But during the Renaissance, scholars exposed the document as a forgery. This revelation raises further questions. If the donation was fabricated, who crafted it, and for what purpose? Many see this forgery as evidence of an internal conspiracy within the Church, one meant to secure its supremacy over the Christian world. Some theorists suggest that a clandestine faction within the Church used this document to broaden its reach. Others speculate that the papacy was aware of the falsity of the donation, but deliberately exploited it to assert authority over European monarchs and strengthen its political grip. These theories grow more compelling when examining the Church's role in crowning and dethroning monarchs. From the early medieval period, the papacy held the unique power to legitimize rulers through coronations, acts deemed to be sanctioned by divine will. This begs the question with the power to anoint kings. To what extent did the Church control the destinies of European nations? The crowning of emperors in the Holy Roman Empire is one example, with the Pope conferring legitimacy upon rulers, cementing a symbiotic relationship between secular and ecclesiastical authority. However, this alliance was not without friction. Numerous clashes occurred as popes and emperors vied for ultimate control. One of the most famous conflicts was the investiture controversy of the 10th century, during which Pope Gregory VII excommunicated Emperor Henry IV, compelling him to submit to the Church in the iconic walk to Canossa. To some, these power struggles were carefully orchestrated spectacles designed to reinforce the Church's authority while maintaining a delicate balance of power between religious and political realms, ensuring public obedience to a system that preserved the interests of both church and state. For those who believe in these theories, the Church and monarchs secretly cooperated to maintain a social hierarchy that safeguarded their influence. Education and cultural control were among the Church's most effective tools in this endeavor. For centuries, it held a near monopoly over education across Europe, directing schools and universities, and thereby influencing the ideas accessible to the population. Charlemagne's Palatine School, overseen by clergy, exemplifies this intertwining of knowledge and doctrine, ensuring that secular learning conformed to Catholic principles. Monastic scribes also played a critical role in controlling information. While transcribing ancient manuscripts, these monks preserved religious texts, but some argue that they selectively modified or omitted content that could undermine church authority. By shaping which knowledge was accessible, the Church influenced not only religious beliefs but also the intellectual and cultural development of medieval Europe. Supporters of these theories contend that the Church concealed knowledge that might have reshaped society, texts and ideas deemed heretical or potentially subversive, including scientific theories and philosophical reflections that contradicted its worldview. The trial of Galileo Galilei serves as a striking example. When he proposed a heliocentric model of the universe, the Inquisition condemned him. Was this condemnation born of genuine theological objection, or was the Church protecting a geocentric model that symbolically reinforced a divine hierarchy with God, and by extension the Pope, at the center? For those who question the Church's motivations, the Galileo affair is emblematic of a broader agenda: control over thought and the preservation of a worldview that kept the Church at the pinnacle of authority. As theories continue to emerge about hidden forces and decisions guiding the Catholic Church's history, they suggest an institution whose power extended far beyond spiritual matters, shaping political and social landscapes to its advantage. From suppressing alternate gospels to fostering alliances with monarchs, the Church's role in history reveals layers that challenge the simplicity of its established narrative. Through falsified documents, historical manipulation, and tight control over information, the Catholic Church cemented its authority across centuries, building an alliance with ruling elites that transcended kingdoms and empires. But an underlying question remains: were these actions calculated steps in a grand design to control humanity's fate, positioning the Church as the exclusive bridge between God and the people? As the Catholic Church's influence expanded, it ventured beyond merely shaping the political trajectories of nations. It molded the everyday experiences of individuals. Its authority extended well past spiritual matters, permeating cultural and social domains and influencing how people perceive the world. Among the most infamous tools of this control was the Inquisition, a network established ostensibly to identify and eliminate heresy. But according to some theorists, it was aimed at regulating the population and quashing any opposition to church authority. During the 11th and 12th centuries, the Inquisition, primarily operated by the Dominican and Franciscan orders, constructed an extensive network of informants and surveillance. Through interrogations often involving severe torture, many were coerced into confessing to crimes they hadn't committed. Physical and mental anguish were used as means to extract compliance, justified by the Church's proclaimed need to root out heresy. Yet some argue the Inquisition's purpose extended beyond mere religious control. It was also a means to stifle any intellectual autonomy that could undermine the Church's doctrine and influence. Books and manuscripts presenting alternative views were systematically destroyed, and dissenting scholars faced persecution. Lost among the flames may have been texts offering differing perspectives on religion, philosophy, and science, works that could have reshaped human thought. The Church's repressive tactics extended beyond brute force. It also employed censorship and propaganda to shape public sentiment. Art and literature were carefully curated to reinforce a worldview that validated the Church's supremacy. Grand sculptures, paintings, and architectural feats like St. Peter's Basilica became visual affirmations of divine authority and the Church's role as Earth's spiritual mediator. The Renaissance period, often celebrated for its artistic splendor, saw the Church as one of its most prominent patrons. Works by artists like Michelangelo and Raphael, commissioned by the Vatican, were not only masterful but also instrumental in glorifying the Church's power. These masterpieces, while valued today for their aesthetic achievement, served to root the Church's magnificence in the minds of the people. Similarly, the Church incorporated elements from pre-existing pagan traditions into the Christian calendar to ease conversions. For instance, Christmas was aligned with the winter solstice, a significant date in pagan rituals, while Easter, marking Christ's resurrection, coincided with springtime celebrations of rebirth and renewal. This adaptation fostered a seamless cultural shift, melding Christian observances with familiar pagan customs. Symbols and rituals, too, were appropriated and transformed, most notably the cross, which, long before its Christian adoption, had symbolized life and power in various ancient cultures. This strategic syncretism was no coincidence. It allowed Christianity to resonate with diverse societies, reinforcing an identity that unified distinct peoples under a single faith. Thus, the Church not only provided spiritual guidance but also engineered a cultural identity that integrated widely respected symbols. Through this manipulation of belief, it forged a bond between faith and familiar tradition, strengthening its standing among the people. By supporting renowned artists and cultural figures, the Church not only enriched the Western artistic tradition, but also crafted an enduring image of its authority as majestic, just, and divinely inspired. Over the centuries, this fusion of beauty, power, and spirituality established the Church as a cornerstone of European society, shaping traditions and values that govern daily life. The Church's influence reached new heights during the Age of Exploration, where it played a decisive role in the European colonization of the Americas, often justifying territorial expansion as a mission to convert indigenous populations. While spreading Christianity among indigenous groups, it intertwined religious fervor with the ambitions of European empires eager to explore and dominate new lands. This mission to save pagan souls masked a strategy of cultural subjugation with conversion as a means of control. Under the auspices of missionary orders like the Jesuits, Franciscans, and Dominicans, the Church sought to introduce Christianity, dismantling existing belief systems and replacing them with its own doctrines. Historians argue that this forceful conversion led to the obliteration of entire cultures. Cells were destroyed, spiritual artifacts desecrated, and entire bodies of ancestral knowledge were erased, dismantling the rich spiritual traditions that had defined these communities. Naturally, indigenous populations resisted, leading to confrontations that shaped the colonial experience. The Church often justified such measures by branding indigenous practices as pagan, asserting Christianity's superiority as a moral imperative. This approach led to the near extinction of ancient languages, cultural practices, and belief systems, replaced by Christian sacraments and teachings that reshaped the spiritual landscape of entire civilizations. However, not every missionary agreed with this forceful transformation. Some, witnessing the brutality inflicted upon native peoples, advocated for their protection. Figures like Bartolomé de las Casas emerged as defenders of indigenous rights, openly condemning the violence and exploitation carried out in the name of faith. Yet, the Church's alignment with European monarchies meant that, while certain clergy sought to shield indigenous communities, its institutional stance ultimately served as justification for colonial dominance. This ambivalence created internal tensions within the Church, as some missionaries saw colonization as a spiritual responsibility, while others recognized the cultural devastation it wrought. By establishing a delicate balance between religious mission and political strategy, the Church extended its influence into the lives of millions, consolidating its authority as not only a spiritual guide but also a cultural powerhouse. The Church's dominance over art, education, and even the interpretation of history allowed it to shape society's worldview, embedding itself as the definitive authority in both sacred and secular spheres. Through centuries of calculated alliances, suppression of dissent, and cultural integration, it became not merely a religious institution but an indelible force in shaping the destinies of entire nations and civilizations. The Catholic Church's expansion into the Americas brought not only spiritual influence but also substantial economic gain. Lands conquered during colonization were often assigned to religious orders, transforming these groups into prominent landowners. These properties supported missionary efforts, the construction of churches and schools, and facilitated the establishment of a social infrastructure that tied indigenous communities to the Church. Conversion to Christianity often came with promises of protection against the abuses of secular colonial powers, positioning the Church as both a sanctuary and a powerful enforcer. Over time, the Catholic Church's influence grew to encompass nearly every aspect of social and cultural life in the Americas. The Christian faith became a cornerstone, promoted through religious festivals, processions, and rituals that gradually replaced indigenous celebrations. Many elements of indigenous traditions were subtly incorporated, making conversion seem like a natural extension of local customs. This integration of beliefs served to reshape cultural identities, creating a new norm where European faith and practices became dominant. While religious leaders often viewed this spread of Christianity as a victorious mission, the legacy of this movement is highly controversial. Many scholars argue that this process was a form of ethnocide, where the Church's evangelization served as a justification for exploitation and domination. This duality of faith, power, and politics has left a complex legacy, one that has sparked modern debates around the motives and consequences of the Church's influence in the New World. Reflecting on the Catholic Church's expansive role in history leads us to a crucial crossroads, where our traditional perceptions of historical events are challenged. The power and control wielded by the Church were not solely byproducts of its influence, but according to some theories, part of a deliberate, far-reaching strategy to shape the world according to its design. As the medieval period gave way to the early modern era, the Church faced mounting opposition, particularly with the advent of the Protestant Reformation. Figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin sparked movements that directly challenged the Catholic Church's authority, exposing the vulnerability of papal power when confronted with organized resistance. This religious schism not only divided Europe, but also marked the beginning of a shift in spiritual allegiance and intellectual freedom. In response, the Catholic Church adopted a range of strategies to preserve its influence. The Counter-Reformation, along with the establishment of the Jesuit order, emphasized a new approach focused on education, diplomacy, and peaceful conversion. This intellectual and persuasive strategy contrasted with the Church's earlier reliance on overt force. Yet some believe that these outwardly gentle tactics masked covert efforts to retain control. Hidden agendas, they argue, continued to operate behind the scenes, preserving the Church's reach in ways less visible but equally powerful. The emergence of the Illuminati in the 18th century fuels some of these theories. This secretive society is often linked to ideas of occult control and elite manipulation. While the Illuminati is generally considered separate from the Church, some speculate that its rise represents a continuation of efforts by a powerful elite to govern historical narratives and shape political futures. Whether directly connected or not, the parallel suggests a lineage of secretive control that may extend beyond conventional religious institutions. Recent discoveries in the Vatican's secret archives have added fuel to these theories. These once inaccessible documents contain records and correspondences that may reveal the Church's involvement in pivotal historical events, sparking speculation about previously hidden motives. For those who question the Church's role in shaping history, these archives could hold evidence of a sophisticated network of influence, weaving through centuries and potentially still active today. At the heart of these theories lies the possibility that the Catholic Church's inception and evolution were not simply religious developments, but stages in a long-term strategy to dominate not only spiritual life, but also humanity's understanding of the world. If the Church indeed manipulated historical events for its benefit, the implications are profound. What hidden motives drive the leaders and institutions that shape our reality? To what extent are our beliefs and perceptions subtly controlled by forces that remain unseen? The enigmatic origins of the Catholic Church, interwoven with political, social, and spiritual interests, raise enduring questions. As we examine history, it's essential to recognize that the narratives we know might represent only the visible surface. Beneath lies a complex, and perhaps darker, layer of history that challenges conventional accounts and invites us to reconsider what truly happened. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church consolidated its hold over European knowledge and culture, becoming the primary influence on society's intellectual development. As the sole source of education for much of the population, the Church had unparalleled power to shape thought from a young age, ensuring that teachings aligned strictly with Catholic doctrine. Nearly all educational institutions were under church authority, providing instruction that focused heavily on religious education while restricting opportunities for secular learning. This educational monopoly also extended to the preservation of ancient knowledge, but with certain modifications. Monastic scribes responsible for transcribing manuscripts viewed this task as a form of devotion. However, some theories suggest that in their meticulous transcription, these monks occasionally altered or excluded passages that contradicted church teachings. This selective preservation meant that the church not only controlled knowledge, but also curated it, deciding which ideas would endure and which would be forgotten. Through its dominion over education, the church became the gatekeeper of history, philosophy, and science, ultimately influencing people's worldview. By shaping the information that societies accessed, the church established itself as the ultimate authority on truth, reinforcing its power not just over faith, but also over every intellectual and cultural dimension of medieval life. The church's control of knowledge was a profound instrument of power. By limiting access to alternative ideas, it maintained a worldview that kept people reliant on its guidance and spiritual leadership. Whether by carefully preserving or subtly altering manuscripts, the church shaped not only the beliefs, but also the very minds of the populations under its sway. This deliberate shaping of knowledge ensured that the church remained the focal point of truth and understanding for centuries. The implications of this influence are still debated. For many, the church's role as both preserver and censor of ancient knowledge was a dual-edged sword. It kept alive crucial aspects of cultural heritage while stifling perspectives that might have propelled society in different directions. By selectively curating history, the church not only influenced the past, but also guided the intellectual and spiritual trajectory of future generations. Through its intricate web of power, knowledge, and belief, the Catholic Church established a legacy that shaped civilization itself. As we peel back the layers of this history, the full impact of the Church's influence on humanity's development becomes more apparent. The question remains, was this influence merely the result of religious devotion, or was it a calculated exercise of control over humanity's destiny? The crowning of Charlemagne by the Pope in 800 AD illustrates the deep intertwining of education, politics, and religion in medieval society. Through the establishment of the Palatine School, Charlemagne sought to fortify his empire with an education system rooted in Christian values, supervised by the clergy. This educational foundation emphasized obedience and unwavering faith, reinforcing a social hierarchy where the church and nobility reigned supreme. The church's influence extended beyond education, shaping philosophy, science, and historical interpretation. Any scientific or philosophical thought that diverged from the Catholic worldview faced immediate resistance. Galileo's heliocentric theory provides a vivid example. His assertion that the Earth orbited the Sun was in direct conflict with the Church's geocentric view, a perspective that not only appeared to align with Scripture, but also upheld a cosmic order symbolically positioning the Church at the center of existence. This monopoly over knowledge transformed the Catholic Church into a dual authority, both spiritual and political, with unparalleled influence. For centuries, European culture remained confined within a religious framework where critical thinking was suppressed and intellectual freedom was curtailed. Many historians argue that this insistence on a unified worldview kept the Church at the center of social and political life, reinforcing its position as the ultimate authority. The Church's control of information and its suppression of dissent cemented the idea that any challenge to its teachings was not just a religious transgression but a fundamental threat to societal order. By censoring and manipulating knowledge, the Church established an intellectual blockade, limiting the dissemination of ideas that might have accelerated cultural and scientific progress. In a society where information flowed primarily through the Church, religious doctrine became the foundation for understanding life and the universe, allowing the Catholic Church to dominate medieval thought and direct the course of European history with minimal opposition. The Inquisition stands as one of the Church's most formidable instruments for enforcing doctrinal conformity. Officially created to combat heresy, the Inquisition evolved into a powerful tribunal with near unrestricted authority. It became a weapon not only against theological dissent, but also, according to some theories, against any form of thought that could threaten the Church's control over society. As the Inquisition expanded, it adopted increasingly draconian measures to root out opposition. Across Europe, particularly in countries like Spain and Italy, where the Church's influence was especially strong, Inquisition courts were established to identify and prosecute those deemed heretical. Dominican and Franciscan monks were appointed to lead this process. Using methods of interrogation and torture that often forced innocent individuals into false confessions, the pervasive fear of denunciation created an atmosphere of suspicion, driving neighbors, friends, and even family members to turn on one another. This climate of distrust effectively silenced opposition, fostering a society where submission was the norm. Some historians believe that the Inquisition was more than a spiritual tool. It was a methodical mechanism designed to suppress any form of critical thought that might destabilize the Church's power. Thousands of books and manuscripts were destroyed during this period, depriving future generations of alternative perspectives on faith, science, and philosophy. This erasure of ancient knowledge is seen by some as a loss that delayed intellectual progress by centuries. The Inquisition's efforts went beyond the suppression of texts. Various mystical and spiritual traditions that had coexisted within early Christianity, offering a more intimate and personal approach to faith, became targets of persecution. The Church's imposition of rigid doctrine ensured that only official interpretations of sacred texts were accepted. Practices such as Gnosticism or contemplative spirituality, which offered alternative paths to the divine, were swiftly silenced. Galileo's conflict with the Inquisition epitomizes the clash between the Church and scientific inquiry. By proposing a heliocentric universe, Galileo challenged the Church's geocentric view that placed Earth and symbolically the Church at the center. According to some theorists, the Church's opposition to Galileo was not just theological, but also about the threat his ideas posed to its authority. Admitting the possibility of error in scientific matters could prompt people to question the Church's spiritual authority. In addition to direct persecution, the Inquisition exercised power through censorship and propaganda. Art and literature became key tools in promoting the Church's worldview, reinforcing its role as the mediator between humanity and God. Religious imagery depicting saints, angels, and biblical scenes was strategically used to instill the belief that salvation was attainable only through the Church, embedding its presence in every aspect of daily life. Through art, education, and the suppression of alternative views, the Inquisition solidified a culture of obedience and conformity, securing the Church's authority throughout medieval Europe. The Catholic Church's influence on art and culture was profound, setting a tone that would endure for generations. The Church funded monumental works of art and directed their message, using them as both devotional expressions and tools of religious propaganda. Artists like Michelangelo, who painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and Raphael, whose frescoes adorned the Vatican, produced works that conveyed the power, beauty, and inevitability of the Church's place in the world. The Church's patronage of the arts was not just an expression of faith, it was a calculated exercise in authority. Each masterpiece served as a visual sermon, imprinting the Church's ideology in the minds of the masses. By controlling the artistic output of the time, the Church not only dominated religious thought but also shaped public perception of the divine, presenting itself as the sole path to salvation. As the Catholic Church's influence expanded across all facets of life, it maintained its position as a force shaping history, society, and individual beliefs. Through strategic use of education, art, and the suppression of dissent, the Church forged a legacy that defined the cultural and intellectual landscape of Europe. This legacy continues to echo through time, reminding us of the profound and enduring impact of an institution that held the reins of power over both the spiritual and temporal realms for centuries. The Catholic Church's sponsorship of great artists and architects was not just for beautifying places of worship, it was a strategic endeavor to embed its doctrines within the cultural psyche. Monumental Gothic cathedrals, with their towering spires reaching toward the heavens, were designed to evoke awe and submission to the sacred. These structures were a powerful reminder of the grandeur of God, and by extension, the Church's own authority as his earthly representative. For a largely illiterate population, the visual impact of these cathedrals served as a form of catechism. Religious teachings came alive in the intricate images and symbols filling the walls, embedding church doctrines in the hearts and minds of the faithful. Another critical tactic in the Church's strategy was the incorporation of pagan celebrations into the Christian calendar. This method facilitated the acceptance of Christianity among newly converted populations. For instance, Christmas was intentionally placed around the winter solstice, a period rich with pagan festivities. Similarly, Easter, symbolizing the resurrection of Christ, aligned with ancient spring festivals celebrating rebirth and renewal. These adaptations made it easier for converts to embrace Christianity, subtly blending it with existing traditions. Over time, Christianity became a natural, inevitable part of everyday life, gradually replacing former deities and customs. In this way, many symbols and rituals were integrated into Christianity from pre-existing cultures. The cross, now a powerful Christian emblem, had long been a symbol of life and strength in ancient civilizations. This deliberate syncretism was not accidental but a calculated effort to create a religion adaptable enough to be embraced by diverse cultures. By weaving Christian beliefs with respected ancient symbols, the Church established a spiritual framework while simultaneously constructing a cultural identity that united various groups under a common faith. This synthesis not only broadened the Church's influence, but also anchored its presence in the collective imagination, lending it an aura of timeless authority. The relationship between art, culture, and religious power highlights the Catholic Church's adeptness at harnessing popular imagination to solidify its supreme status. By funding the works of renowned artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, the Church not only enriched Western artistic heritage, but also reinforced its own image as beautiful, just, and divinely ordained. Through the centuries, this association of beauty, authority, and spirituality allowed the Church to establish itself as a cornerstone of European society, extending its influence from the spiritual realm into the traditions, values, and daily lives of the people. During the age of European exploration, the Catholic Church played an instrumental role in the colonization of the Americas. Conversion to Christianity served as both a justification for territorial expansion and a means of social control. As missionaries set out to save indigenous souls, they often suppressed local beliefs, replacing them with Christian doctrine. This mission, however, was deeply intertwined with the ambitions of European empires eager to conquer and claim new lands. For many historians, the process of forced conversion led to the obliteration of entire cultures as sacred temples, spiritual artifacts, and ancestral knowledge were systematically destroyed. The imposition of Christianity was met with resistance from indigenous populations, leading to conflicts that punctuated the colonial experience. The Church justified these acts as necessary steps to eradicate paganism and affirm the supremacy of the Christian faith. However, this approach came at a heavy cost. The erasure of languages, traditions, and spiritual practices that had defined the identities of indigenous cultures was profound. The teachings of the Church's sacraments and doctrines replaced these traditions, creating a new reality grounded in European religious norms. Not all missionaries agreed with the harsh approach of forced conversion. Figures such as Bartolomé de las Casas spoke out against the abuses inflicted upon indigenous peoples, advocating for their rights and denouncing the violence done in the name of faith. Nonetheless, The Church's alignment with European monarchies often meant that its influence was used to legitimize domination, even as certain missionaries tried to protect new converts. This ambivalence created internal tensions within the Church, as some saw colonization as a religious duty, while others recognized the harm it inflicted on the communities it sought to convert. The Church also derived economic gains from this process. Conquered lands were frequently granted to religious orders for governance and oversight, establishing them as landowners of vast colonial territories. These lands provided resources for missionary efforts, the building of churches and schools, and served as a means to secure the loyalty of indigenous populations. Conversion to Christianity was often accompanied by promises of protection from the abuses of secular colonizers, positioning the Church as both a refuge and a potent instrument of control. Over time, the Catholic Church became a dominant force in the social and cultural fabric of the Americas. The Catholic faith was consolidated through rituals, religious festivals, and processions that gradually replaced indigenous celebrations, incorporating elements of native traditions to make conversion more accessible. The Christianization of local customs became a strategic tool for reshaping the cultural identity of these societies, creating a new order in which European beliefs and customs became the norm. Though religious leaders celebrated this expansion of Christianity as a victory of faith, its legacy is complex and debated. For many, this mission represents a form of cultural erasure, where evangelization served as a veil for domination and exploitation. Thus, the Catholic Church's influence in the New World remains an intricate issue, one where the threads of faith, power, and politics are inseparably woven. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration into the Catholic Church's historical influence, we encounter a tapestry woven with truth and mystery, where facts and speculation intertwine, leaving us to ponder what lies behind the accepted versions of history. Reflecting on the centuries-long legacy of the Catholic Church, it is evident that its influence shaped much of the known world, guiding beliefs and actions while exerting unparalleled authority over both spiritual and temporal domains. This journey through history reveals a narrative that challenges our understanding of the Church's role, encouraging us to question the broader forces that have shaped human thought and experience. The Catholic Church's dominance in the Middle Ages, with its firm grip on European knowledge and culture, allowed it to mold society's collective understanding. Through its patronage of the arts, it curated a worldview that reinforced its doctrines, ensuring that even the illiterate could grasp its teachings through visual representations. By controlling education and aligning secular learning with religious dogma, the Church limited alternative perspectives, cementing itself as the ultimate authority over both intellect and faith. The power wielded by the Church was multifaceted. It preserved ancient knowledge while also determining what information should endure. This selective curation of history influenced not only the medieval world, but also the development of future generations, shaping minds in alignment with the Church's vision of reality. As we conclude this journey, we are left with questions that resonate deeply. Was this influence a natural extension of spiritual leadership, or was it a calculated exercise in control, woven into the very fabric of history? The complex legacy of the Catholic Church invites us to look beyond what is visible, to consider the forces that continue to shape our understanding of the past, and ultimately, to ponder the profound influence of an institution that stood at the crossroads of faith, knowledge, and power for centuries. If this journey into the hidden origins of the Catholic Church has intrigued you, don't stop here. This is just the beginning. There's so much more to uncover, and we're here to guide you through every twist and turn of this fascinating mystery. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode of our deep dives into the secrets of history and faith. If you found this video thought-provoking, give it a thumbs up and share it with others who crave the truth. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think lies behind the Church's origins? Let us know in the comments below, and let's start a conversation. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Together, Let's continue to question, explore, and uncover the stories hidden in the shadows. See you in the next video.